BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, the Climate Change Committee is revising its advice on eating meat. And we hear from a farmer finding ingenious ways to make machinery last longer.
I don't suffer from open checkbook syndrome, I'm afraid. So we have to sort of make do amend, really. If there's something that will do, then it will do.
More on that later. First, farmers have to drive change if we're to meet our legally binding targets on improving the environment. Well, so says the Office for Environmental Protection, the OEP, in a new report looking at the last government's progress on meeting targets on water quality, air pollution and stopping biodiversity loss. It says England remains largely off track as progress slowed and very substantial challenges remain if targets are to be reached by 2030. Professor Robbie MacDonald, Chief Scientist at the OEP.
Well, we're very concerned, not least because many of these targets are due in the next few years. So we have targets for 2027, 28 and really important biodiversity targets by 2030. So they're all on the watch of the current government. Now, our assessment, of course, actually mostly refers to the work undertaken under the last government. But even then, progress this year we're considering as falling short. In fact, progress is slowing down, which is really not a good situation to be when these targets are so pressing.
How much is farming an issue here?
Well, farming actually we see as a big part of the solution. We make very clear recommendations in our report about getting nature-friendly farming right. And we mean that in the broadest sense. This is about the importance of the relationships between government and farmers and landowners, as well as it is about the technical detail of those schemes and how they're implemented and what benefits they bring. So farmers are absolutely central to achieving targets for biodiversity, certainly. Also important for fresh water quality. And to some extent, some of the other areas of the Environmental Improvement Plan, air quality and access to nature and the countryside.
So when you talk about getting nature-friendly farming right, how do you think that should happen? Because obviously at the moment, farmers and the government have an uneasy relationship over many different issues, but including payments for those environmental goods.
Well, we've seen, and we do highlight in our report, a very welcome increase in the uptake of agri-environment schemes, but they are predominantly at entry level. And so we're seeing good levels of participation of farmers in those schemes, big increases, and that's very important. But that really is the entry point. And we make the point that participation needs to go towards more ambitious aspects of agri-environment schemes, higher tier participation in countryside stewardship and landscape recovery. And really, this is, I think, an important aspect of our wider assessment, that there's a lot of attention at the moment across society and across politics about the impact of wastewater treatment or lack thereof and the impact on fresh water. But we want to shine the light on the other side of the coin here and highlight the importance of agricultural diffuse sources of nutrient pollution and make sure that farmers are both incentivised to do the right thing here, but also that enforcement and compliance is better effected to bring about that sort of change.
If these targets are missed over the next few years, what happens?
It's a very good question, and we're very keen to make sure that targets are met. We have this week, although it's a different subject to this one, we've just this week launched an investigation into what seems likely to be government missing very important set of targets for the marine environment that were actually due to be met by 2020, and government was meant to have reported on that by 2024, and they didn't. So we're interested in why that's the case and how to rectify it. The next big set of targets come in 2027 for good ecological status in fresh waters. We want to see those significant progress towards meeting them, even if, as seems now likely, they will themselves be missed. But by 2030, there is ample opportunity to meet the species abundance target for biodiversity's restoration, for halting the decline of biodiversity. And we want to see the steps taken now to make sure that that's the case. And throughout our advice, farmers are absolutely pivotal delivery. So that's why we put getting nature-friendly farming right at the top of our list.
Professor Robbie MacDonald from the OEP. Now, I spent yesterday looking at shiny new tractors at the Lammer Machinery Show. Today, it's back down to earth with the baler twine solutions that many farmers use. Now, by that, I mean the workarounds which farmers come up with to keep older machines going. They don't always involve actual baler twine, but you get the idea. Andrew Metzen, who farms in Essex, is one such tinkerer. He uses a yard full of scrap parts to adapt his ageing cultivator, that's a machine for preparing a seedbed, even turning it into a seed drill. Theo White's been to find out more.
It's a 5 metre Vadestag carrier, made in Sweden. Got this back in about the spring of 2022 from a farmer down in Wiltshire.
That was a few years old by then, was it?
Yeah, I think it's approaching its quarter of a century this year.
What was it for?
It seemed pretty tidy. I was looking for something to work the ground shallow and fast.
Why keep it so shallow?
Because I don't like spending money.
And the diesel cost of putting up all the earth is...
Diesel, time and tyres, yeah.
So when was it you realised you needed to do something else with it?
When I realised I was too tight to buy more equipment. But at the time, with the inflation that we saw across the rest of the economy, farm equipment really jumped in price, whether it was old, new, broken, whatever. Building it yourself, you can actually get what you want, really. Yeah, pulled up some bean ground with it, and the seed bed was a little holier than I would like, so my next step was to make a set of level boards just to fill in any hills and holes.
So how did you go about making the level boards and attaching them to the carrier?
I already had a set of tines and level boards that I bought from a local machinery dealer, so I raided those for the parts, and the rest I just made in the workshop.
After the level boards and the tines, you then got a little bit more ambitious, didn't you, about what you're going to try and get your carrier to do, and you built a seed spreading system.
It's the old sort of saying that anything's a drill if you're brave enough, so I've made some adaptations so that it will drop seed down in the groove cut by the rear discs on the machine, and then as there's a load of soil in the air at that point, the seed is then covered over with the soil and then squashed in and firmed in with the packer. It's only really for creating what we call a cover crop to sort of maintain the soil biology.
The pipes, the drill, that was something you built from scratch?
Yeah, I could have either bought a machine from the manufacturer for about £7,000 or £8,000, whereas this was made out of bits and bobs floating about the yard by and large.
Why not buy a nice new shiny bit of kit that does all this?
Because I don't suffer from open checkbook syndrome, I'm afraid. On the scale we're farming, it's not viable to have a whole load of options sitting in the yard that are a complete machine, so we have to sort of make do amend, really. If there's something that will do, then it will do.
Andrew Metzen's adaptation saved him a lot of money, but by his own admission, it was a time-consuming process and the results were crude. So what about precision farming? Is it possible to get your hands on high-tech equipment without forking out to big agri-tech companies? Charles Quick, a farmer in Somerset, has created an affordable auto-steering kit which can be fitted to any tractor with hydraulic steering. We spoke on the phone and he explained the project.
I was at university and took a year in computer science, and during that course I thought, actually this isn't all that hard. So I thought, let's make one. How hard can it be? And it worked, amazingly. So auto steer takes control of the tractor's steering and allows it to be guided down the field to a very high degree of accuracy. So my system will stay generally within 2 centimetres of the line that you choose it to go down.
Do people actually need this in this country?
Well, I think that because we tend to have smaller and more awkward shaped fields, there's more opportunity for overlap because there's a lot of short work and funny angles. And so by having the GPS, you are always perfectly accurate and you have no overlaps. The rule of thumb is that you'll save roughly 5% on overlaps and therefore save 5% on diesel and 5% on your chemical and fertiliser bill straight off the bat. I make a kit that's slightly less than £3,000. It won't do absolutely everything, but to get the basics in the hands of everyone will make a huge difference to British agriculture.
Charles Quick, and more on farm machinery tomorrow. The Climate Change Committee is revising its advice on eating meat. In 2020, the committee, which is the government's advisor on climate change, recommended people cut their intake of beef, lamb and dairy produce by 20% by 2030 and by 35% by 2050 to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases produced by livestock in the UK. But the interim chair, Professor Piers Forster, has told Farming Today that in light of new technologies, that is being looked at again.
We're about to publish brand new advice at the end of February, and we're going to completely revisit those estimates at that time.
Why?
Because the evidence has changed. So we're an expert committee that are really based on evidence, and there have been innovations, things like genetics, breeding. We've heard about the diet for livestock and things, and the opportunities where we can begin to innovate. So, but we will ultimately still have to take some pastureland out of production too, though.
So we're talking about reducing our meat consumption, but perhaps not by as much.
You're going to have to wait and see.
Unusually, for a scientist, you're also a farmer. Do you find when you're now responsible for a 200-odd acre farm, not far away from here in Oxfordshire, that you're trying to balance your own advice with what's going to make your farm work?
Yeah, and in fact, it was being a farmer that got me interested in becoming a kind of scientist. So I think there are a lot of synergies. And I think this is why I'm really keen that farmers have good data to work with and they understand the context in which they're operating. I mean, it's not every farm is not going to be the same as any other one, but on our farm we managed to plant almost a third of woodland now on our farm, and we've been able to kind of make some success of doing that. And I'm really interested in these approaches of living laboratories, where this is a part of the net zero journey. We do not have all the answers currently, So I think we don't have to be ashamed of giving things a try when they don't work. That's about innovation, is that you try a lot of things and some of them work, some of them don't work. And I think we have to be bold and give things a try.
As you're probably aware, a lot of farmers feel that they're slightly on the back foot with this. They feel criticised and got at by committees like yours, and feel that you're not taking into account the fact that they also need to make a living through all of this.
Yeah, so because I've got the interim chair job, I'm determined to change that. And because I think at least I'm not a farmer by any kind of pretense, but I can at least think I understand where they're kind of coming from. And I say what we have got when we're producing our new advice, we have been talking to farmers in all the 4 nations in the UK. We've also set up this farming advisory group that has really been able to bring into our advice that farming concern. So I think we do understand. What I will say, the farming community, when we publish our advice, they still might not like it, but we at least understand, we think, and far better exactly where they're coming from and exactly what we have to do. And I sort of want, when we publish our advice in February, to really be a beginning of a dialogue. This is something we have to do. We have to get net zero because of the impacts of climate change. So we don't have a choice. So we have to find a way. And what I would say, I think this is one part of the economy where there is no one country doing a good job with decarbonising agriculture. So I think we can really try and show the way.
Professor Piers Forster from the Climate Change Committee there. That's all for today, but do get in touch because we are on the lookout for rural community champions for an upcoming week on people who make your village or your community run. Please do drop us an email, farming.today@bbc.co.uk, or you can tweet us on X, where we are at BBC Farming Today. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer was Beatrice Fenton, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.